Welcome to Nole Edge, the official podcast of the College of Arts and Sciences at Florida State University. I'm your host, Amy Walden, the Assistant Director for Visual and Social Media with the College of Arts and Sciences. And today we welcome Scott Steppan, a professor in the Department of Biological Science and Director of Florida State University's Biology in London program. Scott joined the FSU faculty in 1998 and is an evolutionary biologist with his research focusing on understanding the origin of biological diversity. Scott, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Amy, and thanks so much for having me here.
So on today's episode, we're saving you a window seat as we travel abroad to get an inside look at the Biology in London program, which has been attracting young biologists and other aspiring life scientists to study scientific history at the physical locations where they happened. The program was officially launched in 2022 and recently wrapped up an action-packed summer with its cohort of 20 undergraduate students. Scott, first off, can you tell us about your role as director of FSU's Biology in London program and how the program came to fruition?
Sure. So my role is kind of like a little bit of everything. So there's almost every week there's a little something to do here or there. A lot of it is helping the teachers, whoever is teaching next year, help them get going, dealing with budgets, dealing with planning how to take advantage of London to get the most out of it for their class, because teaching in London is different from teaching in the classroom. We're very much international programs wants people to get out into the city and to know how to take advantage of those resources is helpful. But also recruiting faculty for the following year, recruiting students to fill up all those spaces, marketing, getting into fundraising, just working with sort of all the aspects. I wanted to teach in London somewhere, and so I traveled to London and met with the FSU Study Center staff and asked them what would make for a good biology class, and settled on designing a class about natural history museums and sort of evolution light for non-scientists to satisfy their liberal studies requirement. And it didn't hit the sweet spot for what the students at that time of their careers were looking for. So, but while I was there, I got to know the psychology program in London, which had over 30 students, and they'd do 2 one-month courses, and realized that this was actually a really good model for getting a good audience of biologists. So I came back, talked to the staff here, and found out that biology was the largest unmet need in the university for study abroad classes. And with help from Rick Wagner over in psychology, kind of modeled our program on their program because they had one that worked well and tweaked a few things that were for us, and we're still tweaking. But we've been able to do it now for a couple of years, minus one COVID cancellation.
We're so happy that it worked out. It's great to see the students abroad in action. So let's talk about location. I know London is a dream destination for so many students, but what makes it the ideal place for studying biological science specifically? Mm-hmm.
Well, for one thing, it's probably the greatest collection of science museums in the world, especially for biology and especially natural history. So you have the Natural History Museum, you have Kew Royal Botanical Gardens, you have a variety of places where biological history was simply made. So Alexander Fleming's lab is nearby, where penicillin was discovered. In Cambridge, you had the discovery of DNA structure by Watson Crick and colleagues. Darwin came up with the theory of natural selection just down the street from the London Study Center. So you just have all sorts of public museums and then the research that goes on behind them. And we're able to fashion our courses to take advantage of both the public and the private behind the scenes.
What do students need in order to be eligible to apply for the Biology in London program, and do they need to be biology majors?
They do not need to be majors. So any undergraduate in the system that have done the prerequisites is good to go. So it's Chem 1 and 2, Biology 1 and 2, and their labs. And as long as you have completed them or enrolled in them by the start of the spring semester before summer, then you can go. And we usually have a couple non-biology majors.
Excellent. What courses are offered in the program, and where do students get to go during their time abroad? I know you mentioned a couple examples already.
Yeah. So the courses change from year to year. It depends upon what the faculty propose. The first year, we had 14 different courses proposed that we had to choose amongst. This year, we are doing biogeography, which I'm teaching. I only get to teach about once every 3 years. And infectious diseases throughout space and time, taught by Dr. Marie Sherrill Dennis. And so those are very complementary because one is very natural history oriented. The other is epidemiology and virology. So that's a nice complement. And going into the future depends on what people propose and what gets selected, but mostly upper division elective courses to satisfy for biology majors, the graduation requirements, because you have to take 2 electives. So you can do your 2 electives in London instead of here in Tallahassee. Places to go.
Yes.
We have a long list already approved. So my class is going to spend the entire day down at Darwin's home called Down House outside of London, which is one of the most popular things amongst the students. It's just this bucolic setting. You get to just hang out where Darwin lived most of his life. A full day at Kew Royal Botanical Gardens and Natural History Museum. My class will go to it twice and get behind-the-scenes tours. In Dr. Dennis's class, go to several of the science museums, the Wellcome Collection, Fleming's Lab, where penicillin was discovered, lab's still there, preserved in its original state. The cholera well, if you are into disease, because it's about disease, but the cholera well, where there was an outbreak of cholera that was a huge health issue, public health issue. And it was at that one where people finally discovered that cholera was passed on by contaminated water. They had not realized that before. And so the well is actually still there. The mapping of cases is what made that possible. And then because of that, public health policy changed, not just for London, but around the world. And urban design changed. And so there's tours of that and a variety of other museums.
That's really cool how many experiences they get to do hands-on. What are some of your personal favorite experiences in the program so far?
Okay, so I have a list that could go on for a while. Some are specifically in the classes, and then some are just the things that happen because you're in London. And going on either as a student or an instructor, simply being in London gives you the opportunity to have some of these experiences. In the Natural History Museum, most of natural history museums are permanent scientific collections for our archival, and they have tens of millions of animal and plant specimens that the public never gets to see. So we're on a private tour into what's called the spirit collections. And so this is where animals are stored in alcohol for long-term preservation. And so this back room is where you have the large cases for the large animals. And so the curator had laid out a bunch of snakes that are native to southern United States and with maps, and specifically for us to say, okay, look at the color variation across the Gulf of Mexico coast. But we're surrounded by there's a 20-foot-long giant squid in its own 20-foot-long acrylic case full of alcohol, 200-pound sunfish, sharks, and then some really famous things like a coelacanth, which was a scientific discovery of the century in the early 20th century. Just all these just fascinating animals. And while we're getting this tour and explanation, students just over in the corner, and it's like on a shelf is, oh, here's a fish collected by Charles Darwin. And it's just there. And,
How bizarre.
And of course that had, got everyone interested. Kew Royal Botanical Gardens, after our class works and tours and lectures and ended around 4:00, the gardens, and this is the premier botanical garden in the world, students were free to go back, take the underground back to the study center where they would live, or just hang out. And so most people hung out and went their own way. And I went with about half the students and just walking through the gardens, discovering it. And some of the students were wanting to go to the redwoods because there's this walkway up in the canopy of the redwoods. And so they went and did that. But it was just the excitement, just a lot of it is being around the excitement of the students. Part of the social program that we have, because besides the excursions we have within the class, we're part of the general broad curriculum, which is what it's called, which is liberal studies courses. There are about 6 to 10 of them going on at the same time, plus there are other programs there besides biology. And if you're part of the social program and it's in the fees, you get to go 3 days to other excursions like York, Wales, the Lake District, Bath. Each month there's one of those. And there are day trips every Wednesday, which are organized by international programs. And there are plays, typically 2 per month. And usually at least one of them is a Shakespeare play at the Globe Theatre on the Thames. And so we were there for Much Ado About Nothing, and the faculty get seats mostly in the round, and then the students are in what's called the pit, and they have to stand through it. But the Globe Theatre Company likes to include the audience. So during the production of Much Ado About Nothing, at various points, they're pointing to the audience and saying something like, there's a saucy wench. And one of the times they're pointed at one of our students. And then as part of the play, the incompetent police run off into the pit and are supposedly chasing the miscreants, and the miscreants have put their jackets onto just two audience members. And then those two get pulled on stage in mistaken identity. And one of them was another one of our students. So two of our students got pulled into the play, and he handed up on stage until the police realized, wait, this man has a Hawaiian shirt on. He can't be our Italian thief. And so then meeting the students afterwards, for me, the highlight was really going around to the other side after the play is over, and they're just totally adrenaline pumping and excited. And then 11:30 at night, walking across the Millennium Bridge across the Thames to go home, and just the sheer excitement and enthusiasm that is infectious.
And all of those things you described are those types of memories that you have for a lifetime and you never forget. So I think that's awesome that they get to do so much, not only in the program, but those memories outside of the program that are made and friendships forged as well. So what advice do you have for students who are considering applying for the biology in London program, but perhaps they're on the fence for one reason or another?
Right. So the biggest concern is money. It is more expensive than studying here. And I know there are students who have not applied because they feel they didn't have the resources. And so the main thing I would say is go to the International Programs website, and they have a biology subsite, and on there's also Money Matters. And that provides a link to a whole page of information about what financial resources there are to assist. It points out, for example, that Bright Futures can be applied, but also a variety of scholarships, some through international programs. The College of Arts and Sciences has its own scholarships, and some of these scholarships don't have all the money used up each year. And so they're usually on the $1,000 to up to $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 a piece, and you can presumably get more than one. So there are ways to alleviate that. The cost doesn't completely go away, but it can be a lot more affordable. So that's sort of the first thing. And then talk to us. So talk to me, talk to my fellow instructor for this year, Dr. Dennis, talk to international programs. You can email them, go to their link, call them up. International programs loves to get people out of the country. And they're very enthusiastic staff and very helpful, and they're there to make it as easy as possible and give you the information. So that can alleviate a lot of concerns. Or just talking to us, maybe it's just more information of what would this experience really be like. Mm-hmm. And so they can get a better idea of whether it's what they are looking for. So, for example, these are legitimate courses. They're not Mickey Mouse courses that are just meant to spend time running around the pubs. We do accommodate the fact that study abroad is not study on campus, and you've compressed an entire 16 or 15 weeks into a 4-week period. And so a lot's expected of the students. It's still serious science. It's a little more flexible, but to get a sense of what the expectations are, and I think from that, students might just come to figuring out what choice is best for them, and then get off the fence one way or the other, and be comfortable with that choice. And so we want to make it easy for students to make the choice that works for them. We think for a lot of them, the choice will be to go, but we can help one way, give information one way or the other.
Well, I think that is fantastic advice. So we end every podcast with our bowl of mystery questions. So Scott, please draw a question and answer.
I get most of that, but not quite.
You want to read it to you?
Sure.
What do you love most about Tallahassee?
I'd say the nice parts are, being around colleagues here at Florida State, being around students. I think it's probably the highlight. The forested areas are very nice, and the ability to do things year-round, outdoors. are definitely nice things.
I agree, and I appreciate all of those things just as much. Scott, thank you so much for joining us today on Nole Edge. And if you would like to learn more about FSU's Biology and London program, including application deadlines, scholarship opportunities, and much more, visit bio.fsu.edu/London, which we've also linked for you in the description box. Thanks for tuning into Nole Edge, and we'll catch you next time.